Every so often, a film arrives that completely catches the industry off guard. A movie made outside the traditional studio system, created by a filmmaker with a unique vision that somehow connects with audiences in a way that expensive blockbusters cannot. In 2026, that film was Obsession. Written, directed, and edited by YouTube filmmaker Curry Barker, Obsession began its life as a small independent horror project with a budget of less than $1 million, but by the end of its theatrical run, it had become one of the biggest success stories in modern cinema, going on to gross over $440 million worldwide, becoming one of the highest grossing films ever made for just under $1 million. Starring Michael Johnston and Inde Navarrette, the film tells the story of Bear, a shy, socially awkward music store employee who purchases a mysterious supernatural toy known as the One Willow Wish. Hoping to win the affection of his longtime crush Nikki, Bear makes a wish for her to fall in love with him. What begins as seemingly innocent desire quickly spirals into something horrifying, a complete and utter nightmare with deadly consequences. More than simply another horror movie, Obsession explores themes of unhealthy attachment, fantasy versus reality, control, obsession, and modern relationships. The result is one of the most disturbing and thought-provoking horror films of recent years. The origins of Obsession can be traced back to 2023. Curry Barker, known online for his comedy and horror content, had released a short horror film titled The Chair on YouTube. The short impressed producer James Harris, who approached Barker about expanding it into a feature film. Rather than adapting The Chair, Barker pitched a completely different project. The concept originated after Barker watched a rerun of The Simpsons' Treehouse Horror 2, specifically the segment involving a monkey's paw that grants wishes with terrible consequences. Combining that idea with themes of surrounding unhealthy romantic obsession, Barker developed the concept that eventually would become the film Obsession. Working from coffee shops while collaborating remotely with producers, Barker spent roughly 8 months writing the screenplay. During this period, he reportedly turned down a larger offer that would have significantly altered the story and transformed Bear into a more traditional hero. Instead, Barker remained committed to his darker, more psychological, complex vision. The project eventually secured financing through Capstone Studios, allowing Barker to direct the film with the budget reportedly capped at around $750,000. Finding the right actors proved crucial. Initially, Barker even considered playing Bear himself before deciding to focus entirely on directing. After an extensive casting process, Inde Navarrette was selected for the role of Nikki. Barker needed an actress capable of portraying two very different versions of the character: the real Nikki, a relatable young woman, and the terrifying supernatural version created through Bear's wish. Navarrette impressed Barker by balancing vulnerability, charm, fear, and menace in equal measure. For Bear, Barker cast Michael Johnston, whose chemistry read with Navarrette immediately convinced the filmmakers they had found the right pairing. Supporting performances came from Tomlinson, Lawless, and Andy Richter. Before filming began, Barker reportedly had the cast watch films such as Hereditary, Midsommar, and Pearl to help establish the emotional tone he wanted. Production then began in Los Angeles during October 2024. Despite its ambitious stories and numerous effect sequences, principal photography was completed in only 20 days, with the additional reshoots bringing the total to 26 shooting days. To maximize efficiency, Barker and cinematographer Taylor Clemens used advanced pre-visualization techniques, digitally scanning locations, and building virtual versions of them before filming. The production adopted a distinctive visual style, center-composed framing, uncomfortable amounts of headroom, long-tension building shots, and practical makeup effects. Many scenes were filmed in real Los Angeles locations, including music stores, taverns, and residential properties. One particularly impressive achievement is how little the film relies on CGI. Much of Nikki's unsettling appearance was created using practical makeup and performance techniques rather than digital effects. This gives the film a tangible, uncomfortable realism that greatly enhances the horror. Remarkably, Barker also edited the entire film himself. While working from his bedroom, he even recorded his own voice on the phone to portray the One Wish Willow customer service representative. The film underwent some significant changes during post-production. One particularly notable alteration involved the ending. Barker's original script featured a much darker conclusion in which Nikki ultimately took her own life after escaping the curse. However, after receiving feedback from family members and collaborators, Barker filmed an alternate ending where Nikki survives. Ironically, Barker felt that later version was even more disturbing due to Navarrette's emotional performance in the final moments of the film. Another sequence had to be trimmed to avoid receiving an NC-17 rating, with several impacts removed from an especially brutal death scene. Now, when Obsession premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival's prestigious Midnight Madness section on September 5, 2025, reactions were immediate and overwhelming. A bidding war broke out almost instantly. Focus Features ultimately secured distribution rights for approximately $15 million, reportedly the highest price ever paid for a genre film at the Toronto International Film Festival. The film was released theatrically on May 15, 2026. Industry projections initially expected an opening weekend between $8 and $10 million. Instead, word of mouth exploded. The film opened to $17.2 million, increased during its second weekend, increased again during its third weekend, and continued breaking records week after week. By July 2026, the film had earned $443 million worldwide, becoming Focus Features' highest grossing movie ever, the highest grossing festival acquisition in history, the highest grossing film ever made for under $1 million, and one of the biggest original horror successes of the decade. Some fun trivia notes. One of the film's funniest moments was completely accidental. After Bear breaks the one-wish willow, Nikki approaches his car and awkwardly spins around before laughing at herself. This wasn't scripted. Inde Navarrette genuinely forgot whether she was supposed to turn left or right and accidentally performed an awkward 180-degree turn. The cast found it amusing. Barker laughed how strange it felt, and the scene remained in the final cut. Another interesting piece of trivia involves Barker's original ending. Although Nikki's suicide was originally intended as a conclusion, Barker eventually felt the alternate ending worked better because Navarrette's devastated scream after the carnage felt far more disturbing than another death. The production also faced unusual challenges when filming location used during the party sequence was later destroyed in the devastating Los Angeles fires, preventing any possibility of revisiting the location for additional photography. Now, what makes Obsession particularly fascinating is that the supernatural horror is really just a vehicle for something much deeper. The one-wish willow isn't simply a cursed object designed to create scares. It acts as a metaphor for unhealthy desire and the fantasy of controlling another person. Bear believes he loves Nikki, but the film constantly challenges the audience to ask whether what he's feeling is actually love or obsession. There's a huge difference between loving someone and wanting someone to love you back at any cost. The tragedy of the film is that Bear never truly understands that distinction until it's far too late. One of the film's most disturbing ideas is that Nikki never actually falls in love with Bear. Instead, her consciousness is trapped while another entity takes control of her body and acts out the wish. This transforms the story from a simple supernatural horror into a terrifying commentary on consent and autonomy. Bear gets exactly what he wished for, but in doing so, he loses the very person he claimed to care about. The scenes where the real Nikki briefly breaks through are some of the most haunting moments in the film. Her terrified pleas for help and desperate attempts to communicate the real true horror of the situation really are unsettling. While audiences may initially see Bear as a sympathetic protagonist, the film gradually forces viewers to question his actions and motivations. Even after realizing something is terribly wrong, he repeatedly attempts to alter the wish rather than completely undo it, highlighting how deeply selfish his obsession has become. What I found particularly clever is how the film avoids giving clear answers regarding the supernatural mechanics of the curse. We never fully understand where Nikki's consciousness is trapped or exactly how the one-wish willow works. Instead, Carrie Barker keeps the focus on the emotional consequences of the wish rather than the rules behind it. The ambiguity actually makes the horror far more effective. The ending is also much darker than it initially appears. When Bear finally decides to sacrifice himself, it feels like a less heroic act and more like the culmination of a tragic journey. His inability to confront reality from the very beginning leads to the deaths of multiple people and destroys the lives of everyone around him. Nikki survives, but her survival may actually be the cruelest of the outcomes. She awakens surrounded by death, trauma, and consequences for crimes she never even committed, leaving the audiences with an ending that lingers long after the credits roll. What really impressed me most about Obsession is just how intelligent it is. Beneath the gore and horror is a film that explores loneliness, grief, depression, social anxiety, obsession, consent, and modern relationships without ever feeling preachy or forced. Bear isn't presented as a monster, nor is he presented as a hero. He's a deeply flawed human whose inability to separate fantasy from reality creates a nightmare for everyone around him. That's what elevates Obsession above many other modern horror films. The scares are effective, the violence is shocking, and the performances are outstanding, but the ideas behind the story are truly what makes it memorable. Long after the jump scares and gore have faded, the questions the film asks about love, control, and obsession remain. In saying that though, the performances from the two leads are absolutely breathtaking. Inde Navarrette's ability to switch between vulnerability, warmth, rage, sadness, and terrifying instability is extraordinary. She can make Nikki sympathetic one moment and utterly horrifying the next. It's a remarkable, layered performance. And in many ways, this film lives and dies on its performances. Carrie Barker's direction is superb and the story writing is excellent, but without two excellent acting performances, the film just wouldn't go anywhere. Michael Johnston is equally excellent, Bear could easily have become an unlikable character, but Johnston manages to portray him as both sympathetic and frustrating. His loneliness feels genuine, his mistakes feel believable, his cowardice becomes painfully human. Together the two leads carry the entire film. Obsession is a remarkable achievement and a powerful reminder that great storytelling always matters more than massive budgets and visual spectacle. This is a true underdog story, and for me it is so important because it breathes new life into the stale Hollywood machine. Obsession gets a 9.5 out of 10, a disturbing, intelligent and emotionally devastating horror film that proves original filmmaking is still alive and well. So what did you think of Obsession? Please let me know down in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dive reviews.